if I go to, okay, I'll try to do
Just
3 minutes
look
here.
at the clock. That's it, and speak
I
from the heart.
understand. Okay. So continuing with the theme of Shidduchim and when Eliezer found Rivka to be a suitable life partner for Yitzchak, the thing was what he saw was understanding the needs of others. So what she did was she fed she just gave the camels water to drink from her jug without she used her initiative basically. She didn't ask or wait for camels to fall down from dehydration or thirst. She did it, and basically uh, we we have to try. I know I missed opportunity the other day, which I feel a bit bad about. Uh, Try to see people that need help. Just to wait. Use a bit of intuition and preempt things without waiting till the last minute. What's it? B'di'evet. Make it a just try be aware uh, and do things that you know people may need your help for without them asking you, if possible.
I agree. Once the opportunity is left, you can never recover it. I absolutely agree. We have to be sensitive, as Kevin said, to the fact that there are opportunities all the time to do good, and to help other people. And you have, I think you have to develop a sensitivity. Yeah. All right. We're gonna get started. Just wanted to um, okay, I wanted to get started. Just I'm waiting for Gavin.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I just had to get something, some air inside here. All right.
All right. All right. I had to look at some of the issues a bit more deeply because it seemed like some of the issues were contradicting each other. So I'm going to share the screen. And why it happened was two things: is that my blood sugar was low. I should have prepared even more, and more and more and more. And also, the thing of it is sometimes you have to look at some of the commentaries and the source thing on a deeper level and do more explorative work. So I'm going to have Gavin just read this Mishnah again, and then you guys are going to pick up some of the nuances. Gav?
Yeah. So now there was something in the way obstructing it. Okay, it's fine now. Mishnah: if one steals pieces of wood and makes them into utensils, or pieces of wool and makes them into garments, he pays their value as of the time of the robbery. If one stole a pregnant cow and it gave birth, or a wool-laden ewe and he sheared it, he pays the value of the cow that stands to give birth, or the value of the ewe that stands to be shorn. If one stole a cow and it became pregnant while it was being held by him and it gave birth, or a ewe and it became laden with wool while it was being held by him and he sheared it, he pays the value as of the time of the robbery. This is the rule. All robbers pay the value as of the time of the robbery.
Fine. So you'll notice something that was well read, Gav. Much appreciated. And by the way, Kevin, that message that you did to look for opportunities to help people, please God, if we can just learn that from all the shirim of Bava Kamma, if we learn that alone, that's worth everything, really. So thank you. Also, I'm not going to upload the shir from yesterday. I mean, you had amazing insights and you did it prep. But I wanted to actually just make sure that all the issues were cleared. The first thing is you've got to know that the Mishnah and the Gemara reverse the order a little bit. Because the first thing that's addressed is the pregnant cow and the ewe that stands to be shorn. Okay? And what the Gemara does is it first talks about the utensils. Do you get what I'm saying? And then it comes back to the ewe and the shorn, etc. So I just want to do a bit of an introduction of some of the subtleties, both of what constitutes a physical change, in inanimate objects and animate objects. I think that's the discernment, and give you the perspective of Abaya and Rav Ashi and the difference between rabbinical and biblical. Now, one of the things that we just need to make clear is that there are two different types of considerations of theft in general. One is the fact that there's sentimentality lost. So if somebody steals something that a parent gave you, you can never recover it back. And obviously you want the item. That's a separate issue. The other one is a utility factor where you, with money, could choose anything to buy, and you selected and chose one thing. Now that also has a certain value because you had a myriad of choices and you made a choice at the detriment of every other choice. That's what money is. You're making choices. It's allowing you the freedom to have multiple options. I think that's what wealth actually is. It's allowing you options in life. I know it's a weird description, but that's how I've always seen it. It gives you options. And one of the things we're talking about here is we're not talking about items of sentimentality. So if you leave that out of the equation, it's going to make it a little bit easier to deal with. Now, I was under a misunderstanding, and that was that a rabbinical sanctioned change allows the teshuvah process because so that you could return it. So it actually isn't the case. Let me give you an example of what I'm saying here. I'm going to talk about it in the Gemara and in the commentaries. But what I'm saying is, you steal a whole lot of finished boards, and you decide to make a dining room suite and chairs, and you steal some wool, and you can undo the boards, and you can return it back to the state, or you could take you steal from the wool shop or a person a bale of wool, and you've got knitting needles, and you decide to, decide to knit a jersey or whatever for your cat or your dog or your pigeon or whatever it is. Not pigeon a ben, Kevin. But the thing of it is, you've done that. Now, what's the likelihood, guys? I'm going to ask you a logical question because I misunderstood it, and I'm getting to grips with it now. What is the likelihood, if you've put in a lot of effort, that you're going to want to reverse that sort of effort in order to make it teshuvah? I mean, bear in mind, this is the level of somebody that's already stolen. He's not holding it a level. He's already a thief. Now you're taking the act of an opportunity well taken, a lot of exertion of spending a couple of Sundays to make items, and then all of a sudden it dawns on him, maybe he wants to return it. Is he going to want to return it to do a teshuvah, yes or no?
Highly unlikely.
Pardon?
Highly unlikely, I'm saying.
Because he spent such a time. So we actually have to understand it differently. The rabbinical reason that a reversible change is considered an acquisition is because the thief is unlikely, after putting in so much effort as to finishing a product and making something useful, as to wanting to return that product and going through the schlep of undoing all his hard work. So what the Torah does is it has a rabbinical decree and says, listen, you can make it teshuvah. Whatever you stole, just pay that money equivalent, and you can keep the chair you made. In other words, it's taking into account that firstly, the person's a thief, and he's not holding it a very high moral standard, and B, he's not going to want to undo his good in order to make it teshuvah. So the rabbis wanted to make it easier for him. And according to that rabbinical opinion, a reversible change, which you could undo and return the object, he's not going to do because he's not holding it a level. So the Torah the rabbis wanted to give him some mechanism to do a proper teshuvah in Shemaim. And that way he says, you know what? I'm not going to undo my hard work, but that wood was worth 60 Rand. But the beautiful chair I made now, oh, that's a chair. Let me give him 60 Rand for the wood. I feel bad what I did, but I'll give him the wood. Well, buy the wool back. And that allows for a proper teshuvah based on the human condition. So the rabbinical opinion is more lenient than the Torah opinion. Because according to the Torah, if it's reversible, you're obligated to return what you stole in the state that you stole it at. And therefore, it doesn't allow for teshuvah unless you go through all that exertion and undo all your effort, which is far more stringent. So the rabbis came to bring a leniency in order to have teshuvah. Is that clear? Is it better explained now?
Sure.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay. Which is something different to what we originally thought. Okay. Now, there's an opinion, the major difference between Abaya and Rav Ashi is Abaya believes the Tana of the Mishnah holds by this rabbinic leniency, and Rav Ashi believes the Tana of the Mishnah doesn't hold by that rabbinic leniency and only holds by the biblical stringency. That's the essence of the argument about planing the wood, etc. That's the essence of it. Now, I'm going to go back to the you and the pregnant cow and explain a couple of things in a little bit more detail. Arthur, is there something you wanted to ask? I see you thinking of something. Your brain's thinking of something. So, let me just give you a bit of a sense, okay? Now, I might have mentioned this before, and guys, I can only apologize. If my blood sugar is low, you shouldn't be the recipient of my confusion nor my temper ever. So I'm sorry about that. But I was a little muggy, and I'm feeling a bit better. I prepared my blood sugar. Sometimes when we do a share earlier, it's advantageous from a time point of view, but sometimes it doesn't allow me any recovery time from during the day. But it's still a better time. I just got to learn how to manage it. All right. So where do we get this, guys? Where do we get? I'm asking you, where do we get this concept that a physical change results in an acquisition, whether it's biblical or rabbinic? There is that concept that physical change means that it's acquired by the thief. It doesn't mean that firstly, does it mean that the thief can just keep it, or does he have to pay something back, or what does it mean exactly? And where does this concept come from? I'm asking you guys. I want to test you guys.
So, yes, of course, he has to pay back the original value of the item at the time of theft. That's all.
Exactly.
He can keep the improvement to the product.
Correct. He can keep. Correct. That's exactly it. It doesn't allow him to steal. It allows him to make financial restitution. Now, on what basis? Because in secular law, there is no such concept as a physical change affects acquisition. Where does this come from? Nothing like this in secular law. Where does it come from? Kev, are you okay? You're a little tired. You okay?
What do you mean?
Is it in the Chumash? Is it in Bava Kamma? Where give us a clue.
It's mafurish in the Chumash. In other words, it's not a secular concept, Gavin. There's no such secular concept.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's from the Torah. It's somewhere in the Torah.
Yeah. Okay. So exactly. So that's what I wanted from you guys. I didn't expect you to quote chapter and verse. If you want chapter, it's verse. It's chapter 5. If you want verse, it's verse 23, and it's in Vayikra. Which is Leviticus.
The boar, Damon? Maybe the boar or
no. So it's in Leviticus chapter 5, verse 23 in Vayikra. I say Leviticus because we do have people watching our shirim. The other day we had 17 people. It could have been that they were all trying to sell us sex toys and pornography. Who knows? No, I'm serious.
Okay. Tomorrow we're going to have 50 followers now.
It could have been some lefties that are outraged,
disgruntled,
saying disgruntled or whatever. But basically, that pasuk says, "And he shall return the stolen article that he stole." Now, if I say he shall return the stolen article, why do I have to have that superfluous phrase that he stole? It's a repetition. Okay. So the reason is that if you look at it, it's coming to teach that the requirement to return the stolen article itself only applies when the stolen article that a person stole is in exactly the same form as when he stole it. Meaning it's saying that superfluous word, and he stole. It's saying that whatever state you stole it in, that's the state you have to return it in. So if for some reason it got broken, or it doesn't resemble the state in which you stole it, in that case, you don't return the article itself, but its cash value at the time of the robbery. And where did we learn this from, guys? In the 65th daf and the 66th daf. Okay? So the concept underlying the robber's legal acquisition of the stolen article through a change is that basically, guys, his original act of stealing the article accords him a special status, which is known as the acquisitions of robbery. We still apply to the acquisitions of theft, okay? But in actual fact, according to the law of possession, possession being 9/10 of the year, you steal it, you got it, you can keep it. It's only because of the Torah's morality that there's an obligation to return the stolen article to the owner. And while secular law adapted it, it's because there'd be anarchy. I don't want my stuff stolen, so I won't steal your stuff. It's the law of reciprocity. What I do not want you to do to me, I won't do to you. It creates law and order. But it's because of their practical nature that we apply it in a secular law, and because of the moral nature that we apply it in Torah law. But you're only obligated to return the stolen article if it's still in extant, which means not only in existence, but in the exact state that you found it. If you've damaged it, you can't return a damaged article. You've got to return the financial value of the good state it was stolen. But when an item undergoes a physical change, it's considered to have been transformed now into something different. So, for example, when we take wood and make it into a chair, it's no longer considered the same wood that he stole. It's a new and different item. It's a chair. Now, we say that two things create the physical change. The one is a change in name. What do we mean a change in name? When you're calling it from, if I've got a piece of wood and it's rough and I could get a splinter, and I plane it down and I make it smooth and I sand it and I create an indentation. Now, a wood is flat. Kevin, if you do a challah board, flat, it looks exactly the same. So does it look any different? Okay, so you planed it and you made it into a challah board. But the fact of it is, if you're planing it and now using that piece to make a chair, etc., that's not considered a significant change. Because in and of itself, it doesn't mean anything, according to a buyer. Okay, we're going to discuss Rav Ashi and a slightly a different thing. But the point of it is, if that planing means it's already in its finished state, according to Tosfot, then you've created something different. But if the planing is one step of production, it's not necessarily considered significant enough on its own, according to some opinions. According to other opinions, it is. But if that planing of it means that you don't get a splinter and you can stick color on, and then that's considered as if you made a challah board, then that planing is the finished article. Then by all opinions, that's considered to have effected acquisition. Do you get what I'm saying? And it's the same thing with regards to so change in name. We've learned this before. Because what we learned is a cow becomes dinner and a steak. It's a change of purpose and a change of name. So we said a change of name does, in fact, count. Okay. So we said that robbery and theft, the laws apply to both of them. Okay. Now, the only thing is with theft, there are other concepts of, the twofold, the fourfold, the fivefold. If you sell it, if you slaughter it, etc., there are other implications compared to robbery, and we already dealt with that in the that was in the 65th daf to the 67th daf. If you want to have a look, I was in the Mamzim Koti. Okay, so what we're going to do is just discuss the calf for a couple of minutes, and then we'll deal with the wood issue. Now, the thing of it is if you have a look where it says, if one stole a pregnant cow and it gave birth, or a wool-laden ewe and he sheared it, he pays the value of the cow that stands to give birth. or the value of the ewe that stands to be shorn. Okay, so what we mean is we look at the difference between the previous and the present value of the calf or the fleece that belongs to the robber, because he acquired it. Why? Through physical change. So obviously it's apparent from Rashi that the robber acquires not the actual cow itself. What did he acquire, guys, if it gave birth? Only the
offspring.
Yes, only the calf, only the offspring. That's exactly it. And guess what? So the fetus that became a calf has nothing to do with the mother, according to Rashi. Now, when a human being grows hair, is the hair part of the human being? Or if you cut it off to make a wig, like in your business, and the hair is beautiful, it has anything to do with the person or not?
Yeah. So I actually looked into that, funny enough, and he agrees that it's not. When you cut hair off, it's a separate entity.
Exactly. It's a separate entity. So we're saying, according to Rashi, that the calf from a fetus, when it's in the fetus as part of the mother, okay. So, but the minute it's a calf, or the minute it's a separate entity. And wool, when it grows on a sheep, guess what? The wool will grow back. So that's a separate entity to the ewe. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means, for example, that if you're holding like the Rosh, the Rosh basically sees it as one entity. Okay? He sees the cow and the calf as one entity. So if that goes missing pregnant, you give the cash back for both of it. If the ewe and the shorn wool, you pay the cash for the value of the shorn ewe and the ewe itself, the shorn wool and the ewe itself. You get what I'm saying? So according to the Rosh, it's one entity. According to Rashi, they're two separate entities. That's one of the things you need to bear in mind. If I'm making sense. Because according to Rashi, he's saying, look, a cow's worth 100 zuz, not pregnant. Normal cow, Pregnant cow, maybe it's worth 120 zuz. Depends what stage of the fetus. Could be worth 130, could be worth 110. But at that point, it gains a bit of weight, gains a bit of value. And at that stage, it's worth more. So you don't have to come up with 120 zuz cash. You return the cow at 100 zuz. The thief or robber gets to keep the calf at 50 zuz, and he makes cash restitution on the difference of the pregnant cow's worth as opposed to a non-pregnant cow, which is 20 zuz in cash. He returns the 100 zuz cow, gives 20 zuz cash. He keeps the 50 zuz calf. As far as the wool is concerned, it's the ewe that stands to be shorn means that it hasn't reached its full hair growth yet. So maybe the wool is worth 50 zuz once it's fully grown, and then you shear it off. Now, the ewe on its own is worth maybe 100 zuz, let's say, right? But the ewe with partial hair that's getting towards the stage of shearing it is worth 120 zuz. So he keeps the 50 zuz of the shearings because it grew more in his presence, the robber, while it wasn't with the original owner. So he keeps the 50 zuz worth of wool, and he gives the ewe back and maybe a 20 zuz difference of what it was like in his partial hair growth, where it was worth 20, not worth 50, once he let it grow further. That's Rashi. The Rosh says you give it all in cash. Do you get what I'm saying? Of the state that it was at the time of robbery. Same state, whatever state it was, meaning if it was worth as a pregnant cow 130, in other words, because it says a cow that stands to give birth. It's not a non-pregnant cow, so it's worth 130 or 120 as opposed to 100 zuz. You give that in cash, but you keep the cow and you keep the calf. According to the Rosh, the same thing with the ewe, that you give the 120 zuz for the ewe that was worth 100 zuz bald, and with partial hair 120, but you keep the 50 zuz of the shorn wool, and you keep the actual ewe itself. Okay, so you keep that, but you give the cash of 120. So in other words, the major difference between the Rosh And Rashi says that the fetus, the calf, is a separate entity to the mother, and the wool is a separate entity to the ewe. Whereas the Rosh sees it as one entity. That's why you don't return the animal and pay the cash difference. You pay the entire amount in cash and you keep the original animal and all of its benefits. Do you see the difference, guys?
Yeah.
The
Okay.
entire amount. I mean the value of the benefit that the robber gained as well, in terms of that's what you pay what the gain is to the thief as well. That's what he must pay. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, look, I'm saying the fact that it was previously carrying a load, the fetus, and isn't carrying that load anymore, doesn't constitute a physical change according to Rashi. So the shearing of an ewe doesn't constitute a change in the ewe itself. It's only in its wool. And that's been transformed again into a separate entity according to Rashi. So then the robber returns the ewe itself, keeps the shorn wool, and pays in cash only the value of how much it accrued up until the time of the robbery. In other words, because it wasn't a completely bald ewe. So it had some value, the wool. Okay? Same thing with the fact that the cow wasn't a unpregnant cow. So it was worth more than a cow that wasn't pregnant at all. But it certainly wasn't worth what the cow's worth and the fetus at the time of the robbery. I mean, because that birth happened from a fetus to a calf afterwards. So the point of it is, because the Rosh doesn't discern between the byproduct and the actual animal, he says you keep the animal and the byproduct and you give cash for it. Rashi says no, you return the animal and you just give the difference to what that byproduct was worth at the time of the robbery, not to what it eventually became. You get that? All right. If you don't get it, then you're going to have to just rewatch the shiur, because it's pretty clear. So let me go into another topic.
That's clear.
Yeah. So the Gemara raises a difficulty, and it's now focusing on the first part of the Mishnah, and it says if one steals a piece of wood and makes them into utensils, or pieces of wool and makes them into garments, he pays their value at the time of the robbery. Okay. Now, if we're focusing on that aspect itself, we're basically saying that if he stole pieces of wood and all he did is plane them, he didn't acquire them. Okay, according to the Mishnah. In other words, if he's making a utensil out of wood, you've got to first plane the pieces of wood before assembling them into a utensil. And the Mishnah is ruling that the robber acquires the pieces of wood only after he transforms them into a utensil. Demonstrates what? That the act of planing the wood didn't affect acquisition. Why? Because, as we said, it was part of the process of physical transformation. It wasn't significant enough in and of itself. We compared that to a different thing where that planing creates the finished article compared to a step in the process. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's according to our Mishnah. Now, the thing of it is, the Mishnah also states similarly, if you steal pieces of wool and you make them into garments, he's acquired them, implying that if he merely whitens the pieces of wool, he doesn't acquire them. In other words, the acquiring process is only if you steal the wool, you whiten it and then make it into the garment. But if you whiten it without making it into a garment, in that particular case, you don't acquire them. Now, there is a slight difference here, because it says, look, you've got to clean the wool of dirt particles that accumulate in the fleece before you weave it into a garment or whatever. I don't know the right weaving, okay? It's not past tense, it's future tense. So the Mishnah is saying that the robber acquires the wool only after he transforms it into a finished garment. And that means that his earlier act of whitening the wool didn't affect acquisition. So we're going to see when we go further, as Arthur knows, well, is that considered whitening the wool, bleaching, or is it a part just to get rid of the dirt? and is white because it's clean compared to the dirty wool it was before. But either way, all we're learning at this stage is if you don't take it to the end product of utility stage, the process isn't considered to effect acquisition in and of itself. Okay? Now, that doesn't make sense if you compare it with the brisa, because the brisa says something else. It said if you steal pieces of wood and you planed them, or stones and you chiseled them, or you take wool and you whitened it, or flax and you cleaned it of its toe, meaning even if you just cleaned of all the grit on the ground, etc., you pay the value as is of the time of robbery. So what does that mean? It means that if you plain wood or whiten wool alone, even without transforming it into a utensil or garment, that effects acquisition. So the Gemara wants to know why there's a contradiction between the Mishnah and the Brisa, because they're completely contradicting each other. Okay? Now, Abaya's opinion is as follows. He says that the Tana of our Mishnah isn't referring to one who stole rough wood and planed and assembled it into a utensil. He's teaching the case of a rabbinically recognized change about one that is reversible. And he teaches that it also affects acquisition rabbinically. Okay, but then obviously a biblically recognized change, such as planing wood, which is irreversible, affects acquisition. So he's saying, look, in our Mishnah's case, you're talking about one who steals pieces of wood and makes them into utensils. And it can only be referring to if you already stole pieces of wood that had been planed. In other words, they're like finished boards, and the robber assembled them into a chest of drawers or a chair, and that change can revert back to its original form. Because if he wants to, he can pull the boards apart, and it can revert to being boards. So that now is not a biblical derisa physical change, because it's reversible. But it is a rabbinic change at which you can acquire it through the physical change rabbinically, but not derisa. Why not derisa? Because it's reversible. But according to the rabbinical opinion, even if it's reversible, it's enough of a physical change to acquire acquisition, because you know that nobody's going to undo their good work. So it's a more lenient approach, but biblically it doesn't affect acquisition because they're already finished materials and you're just building something. And here you're talking about wool that has already been whitened and prepared, and you steal it from a wool shop or a haberdashery shop, and you turn it into a garment. Now, in that way, you can unpick the knitting and you can return it. So certainly, biblically, that is not considered a change in the Mishnah. Why? Because you can reverse it. But rabbinically, it's considered a change because we know people aren't going to do that effort of the teshuvah. So the Gemara is saying, listen, with the thief, if he gives a cash equivalent, can make a full teshuvah, he's not going to undo his work. Okay? But the Bryce is talking about something different. It's saying that there you're talking about an irreversible change because you planed the wood, you whitened the wood, and therefore the Brisa is talking about a biblically recognized change, whereas the Mishnah is talking about a rabbinically recognized change. Do you see the difference? So they're not in contradiction with each other, not at all. They're not at all in contradiction with each other. One more thing, and then we're done. I need these 4 minutes, guys. So Rav Ashi's got a different opinion. He says the Tana of our Mishnah doesn't agree with the general rabbinic opinion that a reversible change acquires renders acquisition. In other words, the general rabbinic opinion is that a reversible change, a reversible physical change acquires acquisition in order to give teshuvah for those that are not going to do the effort to do a teshuvah. They just want to pay cash, and that's good enough. But Rav Ashi is saying that the Tana of the Mishnah doesn't agree with the general rabbinic opinion. And he's teaching only rabbinic recognized changes. And therefore he's saying that if you steal a piece of wood and make it into a utensil, in order for it to stick and there be no contradiction to the brisa, he's saying that in that particular case, you're not talking about a process of planing which is considered insignificant. He's saying that he's taking a piece of wood, planing it, and that finished planing wood becomes a challah board. And therefore, that planing is in fact significant because it does become a utensil. It's a change in name and in function. It went from unplaned wood to a utensil just by planing it. But if you're planing wood in order to make a chair, that's just one of many steps, that's not considered a significant change. Okay, and it's the same thing as far as garment is concerned, that if you basically whiten it and dye it, oh dear, my phone's about to, okay. So basically, if you steal pieces of wool and make them into garments, in this case, garments means felt. He's saying that it's a completely different manufacturing process. You take different materials and you push it through a process where you can't separate them anymore. And that now becomes irreversible because you can't separate the fibers. It's not like knitting it. So in that case, it cannot revert back to its original form. So he's saying that the garments and felts are two different things. Because once they're compacted, you can't deal with it. So the Mishnah is ruling that the rabbi acquires the wool when he makes it into a garment doesn't demonstrate that whitening alone doesn't affect acquisition. Because he's saying, Rav Ashi, that whitening or bleaching the garment, bleaching the wool can affect acquisition. He's saying, but you've got no need to bleach it in this case because it's a different process, making felt. And what happens is they're not made from spun threads and they don't require any sort of bleaching or whitening. What they are requiring is compression. And that compression allows you to not be able to reverse it because it's now one piece of fabric. And therefore, it's irreversible. Same as when you're planing in order to make a challah board, it's irreversible. So they're both talking about biblical changes, and he's just saying that the author, the Tana of the Mishnah, doesn't hold by rabbinical reversible change affecting acquisition. He doesn't agree with the rabbi. So we're talking about here irreversible changes, even in the Mishnah. So there's no contradiction with the brisa, because we're talking about not a step in the process, but it is the finished process, and it's a different process with regards to a garment to felt. So that bleaching could consider an irreversible change, not a proof. All right, guys, I'm finished. I hope this added clarity here.
Yeah, Scott was very good.
All right, good. Guys, I put in quite a bit of work to get clarity here.
Yeah, I can see that. Thank you for that.
Damon,
Yeah?
I'm leaving on Monday. I can still do this